Yeah.
What have you got on that?
Well, this is sort of broader brush, but going back to November last year, after the perennial debate as to whether it's at all necessary that anyone serving the police should hold a degree, whether or not it's related to policing, the then Home Secretary decided that she would score political points by saying that she would axe the requirement for a degree. And lo and behold, the wheel has turned. And on April Fool's Day next year, it will no longer be necessary to hold a degree in order to enter the police as a constable, nor will it be necessary to gain a degree whilst you're in service. So this shows the sort of headline from the College of Policing website. We'll just see how this compares with the sort of direction of travel in terms of education in the country. And this is from the most recent census 2021, showing that at the top there, the data from 2011 in grey and 2021 in blue. And essentially the two sort of big changes are that the number of people with no qualifications in terms of academic levels achieved has gone down quite considerably, whereas the level of those with an attainment of level 4 or above has gone up quite considerably too. So the question really is, how well are police matched to the task at hand? And there was much ado made about the recruitment, or at least proposed recruitment, of 20,000 new police several years ago at the end of 2019, which has taken place over the last couple of years. This is a recruitment poster for it. And going back to that time when Priti Patel was in office, they decided to do this by putting £750 million up, which therefore worked out £125,000 per recruit, which was going to happen over the next 3 years. They described it, strengthening police numbers, as being a priority for the government, and that was going to happen over 2020-21. Well, we're now here at the end of 2023, so we'll look at the police workforce report for up to March of this year and see whether or not the target was hit. Well, miracles do happen, and police numbers are now as high as they've really ever been, certainly since their comparable records began. So the headcount is 2.4 greater than the previous peak, 2.4% greater than the previous peak. Also, they make much noise about 4 in 10 new recruits, 43% being female and 11% being ethnic minorities. We can look at this in sort of chart form across time to see how these were achieved. That's showing from April 21 up until March 23, a fairly even trajectory of increase in numbers, and again, slightly different format. This shows the overall number of police in service. So we have here a little bit of text from that report. At 31st March 23, there were 53,080 female officers in post, accounting for 35.5% of officers, an increase since December 2022. This is the highest number and proportion of female officers in post since comparable records began. Now, that's all well and good, but what does this really mean? And this next graph, I know one can get lost in graphs and what they do mean, but I've put a red arrow on the screen here just to point at the very bottom of it. And this is to do with the ages of people who've been recruited. So in effect, what's happened is that whilst overall numbers may have gone up, the greatest increase is of people who are under 26. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having people in the police who are under the age of 26, but what it does mean, and this is a comment from the Police Superintendents Association, is that it effectively changes the overall balance of experience, which of course is so critical. So the statement here says, we've seen in the final year of the Police Uplift programme, recruiting the largest ever number of new officers into policing, replacing officers that were lost from the service as a result of austerity cuts. Whilst any influx of new officers is positive, this has posed challenges to members and the wider service as forces have worked to meet difficult recruitment targets, to lead and train the new generation, and to prepare for the implications of a young and inexperienced workforce. So he's being quite diplomatic there, but really what he's saying is we've got a whole lot of young people who have absolutely no idea what policing is all about, and what are they going to do, and how are they going to do it, and who's going to lead them. So we'll go next into how that matches with the overall crime picture. So we'll just bring on screen now from the last report ending June this year, crime statistics. This is the overall trend in crime. I should caveat this by saying this is according to Home Office counting rules, which means that it's to do with a crime report and not necessarily definitive statement that a crime has taken place. Nonetheless, we'll just go through quickly.
Sorry, just before you do that, if we just come back to that, I noticed there was no crime at all between 2019 and 2022. If we look at the bottom right-hand corner of that, so during lockdown,
that is
nothing happened. Is
absolutely
that right?
Well, and actually that's case in point about how reports can, of course, distort the overall picture. But that is exactly like Mike says, the little sort of bit of subtext there. Face-to-face interviewing was suspended because of COVID. I mean, that was one of the many ridiculous sort of hold-ups in the judicial process. But we'll just go on. Antisocial behaviour, of course, talked about an enormous amount. But I've just drawn this one out because, in actual fact, it talks about a 15% decrease compared with the pre-pandemic year and an 11% decrease from June 22. So often what one's reading about in the headlines are not necessarily to be believed, especially when compared with the statistical analysis. What I'm going to bring on now is going back to the heart of it, which is how well are police matched to the task that confronts them. Now, this red arrow here points to crime by volume, and right at the top, way out in front, with nearly 3.5 million recorded incidents, is fraud, beating theft into second place, only at 2.6 million. So the point here is that in demonstrating that they have the ability to recruit 20,000 new constables and make a big fanfare about putting them on the street and now taking away the requirement for a degree, what use is that in countering fraud? Fraud typically is not conducted on the street, and fraud is a very specialist area for police. So how on earth is this matching the requirement that the public has for policing? The second point to make, or the very big question to be asked, is that if fraud is such a big issue, how is it that people are swallowing a narrative that suggests that what we need to do as a society is to move further and further down the digital track into digital identity and digital currency? The suggestion that those are going to be proof, sort of somehow fraud proof, is absolute fantasy. So the police, not only are they not going to be able to deal with that, but the statistics demonstrate how vulnerable society is to the very thing that the government's pushing. I'll just close this segment with the sort of the other side of the statistical picture, which shows how police levers have changed in terms of sort of demographics and numbers. So whilst indeed the government may have hit their target, I've just put an arrow on screen here to show that the latest statistics are showing that people who are retiring voluntarily, most of these in their probationary period, has more than doubled since 2019. And that's a very, very telling statistic. Recruitment's one thing, but retention is a completely different matter. And if police are unable to retain people who are supposed to have that leadership and experience quality, then one has to wonder what's next.